1978, the United Nations requested the first international UFO statistics. It said that 63,144 UFO sightings were reported between 1947 and 1978, among them 33,233 in the United States, 5,792 in Great Britain, 1,287 in Germany, and 621 in Japan. Obviously, these numbers are just the tip of the iceberg. According to a recent Gallup poll, 5% of all Americans, more than 15 million people, claim to have seen a UFO. The UFO statistics registered only 1.2% of these cases. The U.S. Air Force investigated 1,147 UFO reports between 1948 and 1952. Their results, 25% remained unexplained. If the apparently controlled maneuvers reported by many competent observers are correct, then the only remaining explanation is the interplanetary answer. This was stated by U.S. Air Force spokesman Albert M. Chopp on January 26, 1953. Since then, the chain of evidence for this theory has expanded immensely. Since ancient times, man has been asking one all-consuming question. Are we alone in the universe? If not, is it possible to come in contact with inhabitants of other worlds? 500 years ago, we believed that the Earth was the center of the universe. Against the lethal opposition of the Church, Nicholas Copernicus and Galileo Galilei succeeded in bringing the heliocentric worldview to the scientific community, proving that the Earth revolved around the Sun. As late as the year 1600, the Dominican monk Giordano Bruno was burned at stake by the Holy Inquisition because he dared to believe there were other inhabited worlds in the heavens beside the Earth. Today we know that our Sun is nothing more than a little star at the edge of the Milky Way, which is just one galaxy among billions and billions of galaxies in the infinite realms of the universe. The astrophysicist and best-selling author Johannes von Buttlar is convinced that mankind is not alone in space.
Unsere Milchstraße setzt sich aus circa 200.
Our galaxy, the Milky Way, consists of about 200 billion stars approximately, because nobody has counted the stars yet. But we estimate that 60% of these 200 billion stars are surrounded by planets like our Sun, with her 9 planets in our solar system. In a vicinity of 16 light years, about 47 stars are in the same condition our Sun is right now. She's a G2 star. Her size is optimal. Her lifespan is about 12 billion years, similar to these 47 stars. The statistic probability is immensely high that there is life in other planetary systems. And not only that, because most stars in the Milky Way are much older than our Sun, we can assume that there are many older civilizations which are also technologically far ahead of us.
Zivilisationen, die vielleicht auch technisch sehr fortgeschritten sind.
Is it possible that the inhabitants of these planets visit our Earth? How can they bridge the vast distances of space?
Ja, nachdem die meisten
Because most stars in the Milky Way are doubly as old as our Sun, we can assume that there are many old civilizations in our galaxy, civilizations with an immense knowledge of physics and super technology. When we see what unbelievable technological progress we have made in just the last 50 years, we can only speculate about the possibilities of a civilization which is, let's say, 2 million years ahead of us. Even our scientists develop models of how to bridge the vast distances of space. For example, take the Einstein-Roseau bridge, a gravitational hole left by collapsing stars when they disappear out of our space-time continuum. There, theoretically, you can move forward in space and backward in time, or into what is called zero time, Also, the relativity theory proved that time dilation is a matter of fact. If you move very fast through space-time, time nearly stops running. Physically and technologically, there may be some possibilities we might discover in the next decades or centuries to practice interstellar travel. I'm fully convinced that extraterrestrial civilizations already discovered these possibilities to travel to other worlds.
Dass außerirdische Zivilisationen diese Möglichkeiten nutzen, um andere Welten aufzusuchen.
For conservative scientists, this may sound like science fiction. But in 1957, Lee DeForest, the inventor of the vacuum tube and father of modern electronics, stated that there will never be a man landing on the moon. Our knowledge about space is growing and changing our worldview irresistibly. Baron von Buttlar, what would these extraterrestrial visitors look like? Would they be humanoid?
Wir kennen natürlich die Bedingungen nicht, die woanders vorherrschen, aber auf der anderen Seite gibt es heute doch Modellvorstellungen, die überzeugend sind. So spricht man vom holographischen Universum.
Of course, we don't know the conditions on other planets, but on the other hand, we have convincing scientific models about the development and evolution of life. One of them is the holographic model of a universe, a model confirmed by subatomic physics. The theory of a holoverse, or holographic universe, says that even the smallest units contain the whole information of the cosmos. On the other hand, we have the theory of Rupert Sheldrake, which is complementary to the holographic model. The theory that there are whole fields of information. These networks of information store the design and experience of these forms and transfer them into so-called morphic resonance. This would mean that there are other humanoid civilizations, because if once a form developed, it will develop everywhere because of the morphic resonance. In other words, if a form of mankind develops on one planetary system, the morphogenetic field would cultivate the development of another mankind on another world. Indeed, we have so many old traditions convincing us, if we investigate them carefully, that man was created because another humanoid race came to Earth and interfered in our evolution. Maybe we have to look for our ancestors not on Earth, but on another world.
Außerirdische Art zur Erde kam, eine humanoide Art, die hier eingegriffen hat, sodass wir vielleicht unsere Vorfahren nicht auf der Erde zu suchen haben, sondern vielleicht sogar auf einer anderen Welt.
Indeed, there are indications that extraterrestrials have visited our Earth for thousands of years. This rock drawing in Fergana, Uzbekistan, is 7,000 years old. Clearly, it shows a being wearing a spacesuit, an astronaut's helmet on its head. Over the scenery hovers a disc-shaped craft, a UFO. In a Japanese cave painting, people are welcoming a luminous spaceship or a group of ball-shaped craft, or the descent of an object in a spiralic course. Also, the 15,000-year-old cave paintings in southern France, showing flying discs over usual hunting scenes, so often that a French archaeologist put together a whole catalog of these Stone Age UFOs. All over antiquity and the Middle Ages, we have reports about the fiery spears, flying shields, and bloody red spheres. On a fresco of an old monastery in Yugoslavia, or here in the oldest church of Soviet Georgia, two strange flying objects are observing the crucifixion of Christ. Orientalist Zecharia Sitchin discovered hints of extraterrestrial visitations in ancient times in Sumerian cuneiform texts.
Well, the books that I've written, including the one that you mentioned, which is the latest, are based primarily on the writings of the Sumerians, who gave us the first known civilization 6,000 years ago. And on their clay tablets, they wrote many tales of history and prehistory. Scholars know them, refer to them as myths. I wrote the books on the basis of asking myself and others, what if these are not myths but things that actually happened? And if you accept the accuracy of these writings, which are echoed in the Bible, especially in the book of Genesis, the story that in essence comes out is that there is one more large planet in our own solar system. The Sumerians called it Nibiru. It comes to our vicinity once every 3,600 years, passing between Mars and Jupiter. And according to those ancient writings, people from that planet, called, as you mentioned, Anunnaki, literally meaning those who from heaven to earth came, arrived on earth for the first time about 450,000 years ago. They came here for their own purposes, and the story is a long one. In the course of being here, they engaged in many activities that are reflected in the biblical tales, including the genetic engineering process through which we, you and I, Homo sapiens, was created.
They reappeared when mankind entered the atomic age. 2 years after the Hiroshima bombing on June 24, 1947, Kenneth Arnold, the private pilot, reported his sighting of 9 glittering objects flying in formation round Mount Rainier in Washington state. He described them as looking like flying saucers. The greatest myth of the 20th century was born, and reports from all around the country caused the U.S. Army and Air Force to deal with the mystery. The first UFO tracking project was installed in Alaska because they assumed that the strange flying objects entered the Earth's atmosphere through the polar regions. The U.S. Army Air Force Intelligence ordered a special team of highly qualified technicians to install the most sophisticated equipment aboard their B-29s reconnaissance planes to retrieve the best possible data on the UFOs. They used magnetic field detectors, radio frequency emission scanners, and 16mm film cameras, or so-called gun cams, installed instead of the guns. Also, the pilots were equipped with 8, 16, and 35mm hand cameras, also press cameras, including 8x10 Fairchilds, the most precise camera of that time, using 8x10-inch wide negatives. The project was placed under the command of Lieutenant Colonel Wendelle C. Stevens from the Foreign Technology Command of the Air Material Command, posted to Alaska for this mission.
And my job was to supervise the team that installed this equipment, and it was also to brief the crews before they departed on their mission and tell them what kind of equipment they had aboard and how to use it and what to look for. And then each time they came back, they were debriefed by their operations people, and then they were turned over to me to debrief on the special applications, the classified section of the mission which I was supervising, and that pertained to the possible encounter of anything unusual over the Arctic. And sometimes they came back with interesting reports. I heard in the debriefings, I heard statements, and I copied them and sent them forward to Washington, describing objects that approached the bombers head-on, stopped in midair, and picked up, reversed to the same speed the bomber was flying. And it would remain in a formation position on the bomber for minutes and then fly away. They reported seeing aircraft or flying objects in the sky that were flying 10 times as fast as the B-29s could fly. They reported seeing objects that stopped in the air right next to the B-29, took a position with it, and stayed there for minutes. I remember one report where an object got in behind the trailing edge of the large wing and ahead of the smaller wing in the position, open position there, and remained for 2 or 3 minutes, and they got pictures with all of the movie cameras and the handheld cameras, including the 8x10 Fairchild camera of this object in position right alongside of the B-29. All of the data that was recorded by this special equipment, the cartridges, cassettes, rolls of film, and everything, after a mission with an encounter, was removed from the canisters and the equipment items and packed in a metal box and chained to an officer's wrist and flown to Washington that night. And this happened on a frequency of about 3 or 4 times a month for the whole year and a half that I was doing this in Alaska.
How did the pilots describe these objects?
Well, we had pilots describe the objects as being disc-shaped in form, completely different from any known aeronautical configuration. And they saw them in the air. They also saw them above them and below them. They saw them sitting on the ice pack in the snow. And this was remarkable because we required a great deal of support equipment to launch the B-29s. Heaters, gasoline trucks, many things. And here are objects sitting on the ice pack that don't have any support equipment at all visible. Nothing. They arrived and landed and apparently can take off. We saw them take off. Pilots saw them take off from this ice pack and fly away. They saw them land on the water and submerge and disappear. Others saw them come to the surface, rise out of the water, and fly away. And all of these things clearly exceeded all known technological developments in the world of that time, in 1947.
These reports gave the Air Material Command forerunner of the Air Technical Intelligence Center of the U.S. Air Force a precise impression of the UFO phenomena quite early. On September 23, 1947, the former Air Force Chief of Staff and the AMC Commander General Nathan F. Twining wrote this report to the Commanding General of the U.S. Air Force in Washington, D.C., classified top secret. The phenomenon is something real and not visionary or fictitious. There are objects approximating the shape of a disk of such appreciable size as to appear to be as large as man-made craft. As filmed in May 1964 by Dr. Daniel Fry, a rocket engineer from Maryland, Oregon, the reported operating characteristics such as extreme rates of climb, maneuverability, and action lend belief to the possibility that some of the objects are controlled either manually, automatically, or remotely, as on this film by Professor George Adamski, Palomar Gardens from 1956. Or here, on a film taken by an Australian TV team on December 31st, 1978. Clearly, we see a luminous dome, a rim around the center, and big portholes. It maneuvered in such an incredible speed that it left this track on just a single picture of the film. No terrestrial aircraft is able to fly in such a pattern, obviously defying the laws of gravity. Obviously, General Twining was impressed by this. Extreme maneuverability, particularly in roll and action, which must be considered evasive when sighted or contacted by friendly aircraft. As filmed in 1966 by the Oldfields, a British couple flying over central England. Here again in slow motion, the Zeppelin-shaped UFO performed U-turns in 1/3 of a second. No terrestrial aircraft could do this. The apparent common description of these objects is as follows: circular or elliptical in shape, flat on the bottom and domed on top. As here on a film taken by a TV crew from New Zealand on January 2nd, 1979. Here we see the rotating disc from the top. Getting closer, we recognize clearly 2 stores. The objects resemble this UFO photographed by a Brazilian journalist in 1952 at the beach of Rio de Janeiro. Here, the dome is visible from the side, surrounded by some kind of portholes. This sensational series of pictures of a dome-shaped UFO was taken by the mechanic Paul Villa on June 16, 1963, near Albuquerque, New Mexico. Here, the metallic reflecting dome is surrounded by a whitish force field. Villa, who claimed to be in contact with extraterrestrials, shot a second series of pictures on April 18, 1965. Experts say that this is the world's best UFO film. It was taken on February 28, 1965 by a U.S. government official named Madeleine Rutherford in a suburb of Washington, D.C. called Silver Springs, Maryland. The footage was taken shortly after sunset and twilight. Obviously, the object is hovering in its own gravitational field. This caused the impression that the object changed its shape. Indeed, the only explanation for the extreme flight maneuvers of the UFOs is that they are surrounded by an electromagnetically generated gravitational field with which they ride on the electromagnetic fields of the Earth like a surfboard on the ocean. A nearly identical object was observed by the British police sergeant Tony Dodd on patrol in North Yorkshire in 1978.
In 1978, I was working in a police patrol car with another policeman. It was a winter's morning. In the early hours of this morning, I was driving a police car along a country lane in the North Yorkshire area, and I drove round a corner in this lane and was suddenly confronted with a huge circular disc-shaped flying object in the sky directly in front of us. The object was about much more than 100 feet away from us. It was disc-shaped with a dome, with what appeared to be portholes around the dome. It had coloured lights rotating round the bottom of it, almost like a neon sign, and it had 3 large spheres protruding from the bottom. It was an enormous thing. It was over 30 metres diameter. But it didn't make a sound. There was no sound coming from it whatsoever. But even more fascinating than that is that the whole object was glowing bright white colour, as if the metallic structure of it was actually glowing white hot. The object moved away from us at probably about 30 miles per hour, and eventually appeared to land in a copse of trees, a very large copse of trees some distance from us, but we weren't able to get to this because it was inaccessible by the road. It was a very remote spot.
In the last paragraph of his secret report, General Twining quotes several reports of well-kept formation flights, varying from 3 to 9 objects. As filmed in 1980 over Hagen in Germany's Ruhr area by Mr. Mars Dahme. Since his retirement, Mr. Dahme started his private UFO tracking project, observing the sky every night with a telescope and camera from the balcony of his apartment, and filmed this cigar-shaped fluorescent object in 1980. This formation of 9 reddish glowing discs in 1979. A computer analysis of the footage we arranged at the NASA facility in Arizona concluded they are single objects more than 2,500 feet away from the camera. The possibility of reflections or a hoax can be excluded. On the afternoon of June 4th, 1980, Mr. Dahme filmed this cigar-shaped UFO over Hagen, finally moving slowly from the eye of the camera. Cigar-shaped craft are quite common in the UFO chronicles and were observed in 1561 over Nuremberg, Germany, and in 1951 over California, as taken by Professor George Adamski through his telescope. In 1974 over Kobe City, Japan, and on April 3rd, 1990 over the Russian city of Krasnodar in the Caucasus Mountains, witnessed by dozens of people. These shots were shown on Soviet television just a few weeks later. Following the recommendations of General Twining, the U.S. Air Force started its official UFO investigation project to collect and analyze as much additional information as possible about these mysterious craft, their characteristics and performance. This program was codenamed Project Sign. Sign evolved into Project Blue Book, which investigated about 11,800 UFO sightings between 1952 and 1969. One of the reports in the files of U.S. Air Force Project Blue Book came from U.S. Navy Commander Graham Bethune.
While flying a transport from Keflavik, Iceland to Argentia, Newfoundland, at about 10,000 feet, this was at night, I happened to observe a little bit off of the bow, about 10 or 15 degrees on the water below the horizon, a yellow glow that appeared as though we were approaching a city at night. Since we were over 300 miles from Argentia, I knew that it couldn't be a city, that maybe possibly it were some ships lighted up, and that there were ships in the area that we didn't know about. I asked the navigator, and he said no, there were no ship plots, and that we were not close to land. So I observed it for a while, called it to the attention of Lieutenant Kingdon, who was sitting in the co-pilot's seat. He observed it for a while. As we got close, within about 30 or 35 miles, the lights seemed to have a pattern. They were elongated, but it was not a circular type pattern, possibly the length of a couple of ships or 2 aircraft carriers, and the width of 2 aircraft carriers. After observing this for a while, we got within a range of, say, 30 miles, the lights went out, and all we saw in the water was a small halo. This small halo started its approach towards us, turned to an orange, to a fiery red, to almost a purplish red, and at about 400 or 500 feet below us, it stopped its movement. I had already disengaged the autopilot in order to try to go under this craft, which it looked like we were on collision course. And at that time, I noticed that it was not sitting level. The craft was sitting at an angle, about 45 degrees off the bow, and it was staying with us. So it continued to move with us for a few seconds. And of course, behind me, the additional crew was standing, and they scattered all over the cockpit. A couple were injured. Then it started its movement away from us, and at that time I could tell it was an intelligent craft of some kind, guided. It came up to take a look at us, and then it started its movement away from us. At that time, some other crew members came up, and it looked at what we were observing. I put the autopilot back on, set my course, and walked back aft, and Dr. Mosier was sitting back there, and he was a commander in the Navy at the time. And I asked him, I said, "Doc, did you see what we saw?" He says, "Yes." He says it was a flying saucer. I didn't look at it because I don't believe in such things. So at that time, I rushed back to the cockpit, and I told Lieutenant Jones, who had taken my seat, I says, "Al," I says, "whatever you do, don't tell anybody that we saw a flying saucer, because they will probably lock us up when we land." So he said, "Well, it's too late," that I had called Gander Control to see if they had anything on the radar. So at that time, we knew that they knew that we had sighted something.
Also in Europe, these strange objects were located by the military. Hans C. Petersen from the Danish Air Force built the military air traffic control services of his country after World War II. As Denmark's first chief military air traffic controller, he located UFOs on radar in 1954 and ordered their interception.
It was one day when one of my people in the radar called me and said, "Major," I was a captain at that, "Captain, we have something on the screen which passes with a speed of 18,000 kilometers per hour. Impossible. Nothing could fly with that speed. I went out there, yes. They were passing with 18,000 kilometers per hour. All of a sudden, after some while, they did not pass anymore. They were stationary around the field. And they came and they left without we could see it. All of a sudden they were there. All of a sudden when the sweep came around, they were gone. I contacted the operations officer and the station commander. They both came out and they wouldn't believe me. I said, "Give me 4 aircraft and I'll intercept them." Okay. Sometimes there were about 20 objects around the field, and sometimes we were down to a few. It was fog, and therefore a lot of people afterwards said, oh, it was inversion, but it was not. It's proven afterwards it could not be inversion, which is a meteorological phenomenon. So at 11 o'clock, I had four jets at the runway, and at 11 o'clock, the fog lifted so we could take off. And I ordered the 4 jets to take off. In that moment, there was 12 objects around the field. And when I said you are cleared for takeoff to intercept unidentified flying objects, 10 of them went away. Right when the sweep came back, there was only 2 left. One 10 miles north of the field, one 15 miles south of the field. I sent the 2 aircraft to the north and the 2 aircraft to the south. 2 aircraft to the north came first, and I said, your boogie, which is the object, is 12 o'clock straight ahead. 12 o'clock, distance 5 miles, altitude unknown. Do we have it in sight? Gone. Came the next one. When it came up, I said, your boogie is 12 o'clock, range 5 miles, altitude unknown. Do we have it in sight? Gone. So it was clear they could hear what I said.
Indeed, these incidents caused a remarkable anxiety among the military, and more than once they almost caused a Third World War. As a result, in 1962, NATO's General Staff started its own European UFO study. Its final report, entitled The Assessment, was completed in 1964. At this time, Command Sergeant Major Robert Odin was assigned as intelligence analyst at NATO SHAPE headquarters, the supreme command of Allied powers in Europe.
I was assigned to SHAPE headquarters in 1963. My first assignment there was with the Operations Division, and I learned of a study in progress, a high classification, cosmic top secret study that had been initiated in 1961 to determine whether there was a threat to Allied military forces in Europe.
What caused this study?
The study was called for because during the early 1960s, even in the late 1950s, there were incidents involving high-altitude flyovers of large circular metallic machines flying in formation at a very high altitude at a very high rate of speed over Central Europe. We learned at the time that the Soviets thought they belonged to us, and we thought they belonged to the Soviets. And we and the Soviets had almost gone to war several times over these objects.
What was the meaning of cosmic top secret?
Cosmic top secret is the highest security classification that the NATO SHAPE headquarters has. I believe they still have that classification level. It's the very highest level. It's above top secret.
Who ordered this study? What did it contain?
Well, Air Marshal Sir Thomas Pike initiated the study. It took 3 years. The conclusions were rather mind-boggling. The senior military officers in SHAPE headquarters were stunned by the conclusions of the study, which was called the assessment. The conclusions were that the planet Earth has been under a detailed, extensive survey by several extraterrestrial civilizations for many, many years. The study concluded that this survey has been going on for centuries, maybe even longer. They indicated that there was a high intelligence involved, extremely high technology involved. The technology that had been demonstrated was at least 1,000 years beyond anything we could imagine. The technology was so intricate and so advanced that it appeared to be magic. The final portion of the conclusion was that there did not appear to be any kind of a malevolent or hostile threat involved, because if there had been, there was absolutely nothing we could do.
A similar conclusion was already drawn in 1948 by the U.S. Air Force's Project Sign.
Project Sign, in time, wrote an internal conclusion that there was an evidence of extraterrestrial contact from beings beyond this planet. that the vehicles demonstrated a technology clearly beyond that of any known technology on Earth, and that the phenomena was real. This was not it's not the conclusion the upper staff wanted, because SIGN was supposed to have been a public information front, and they were supposed to have helped to explain away the phenomena to keep the public from becoming concerned and alarmed. And they've done the opposite. And because they have now become a danger to the research that was being done by the upper staff, Project SIGN was closed, and all the records are put in boxes.
That Project SIGN was right with its conclusion was already proven by a sensational discovery. On July 2nd, 1947, an unidentified flying object crashed near Roswell, New Mexico. After William Mac Brazel, a local farmer, informed the military at the nearby Roswell Army Air Base on July 7th, a secret operation was begun to assure the recovery of the wreckage. They were so unprepared for this event that the press relation officer at the base informed the press about the incident before the General Staff of the Pentagon declared it a national security matter. So it caused nationwide headlines before the official denial followed the next day. Suddenly, the flying saucer couldn't have been anything else than a simple misguided weather balloon.
Well, immediately after the crash, this is the first one that happened officially. There may have been others, but this was the first one that came to the attention of the military first. And they tried to keep it under control, but this was a long holiday weekend, and the information got out. The staff people were not in their offices to protect the escape of information. As a result of this crash, where a part came down at Magdalena, New Mexico, and a part came down at Roswell. These parts were successfully recovered, and then an attempt was made to explain them away as the crash residue of a weather balloon. But because we now have one in hand, we don't know when the next one is going to come down. As soon as it was realized, as soon as they were aware of the fact that they had an entirely different craft than anything known to Earth technology, aviation technology, they notified their superiors up the line through Air Materiel Command to the Air Force Chief of Staff, who called the Secretary of State for the American government and advised him that they have an alien vehicle on our territory, properly the business of the Secretary of State. The Secretary of State at that time was General George C. Marshall, the father of the Marshall Plan. And General Marshall, by now realizing that it is truly a unique vehicle and that it may be extraterrestrial, quickly assigned 12 people, staff people, a number of staff people, let's say, including scientists and high-ranking officers, to begin an immediate examination of the event. And they did, and realizing in the process that it is now an extraterrestrial vehicle, they began to create contingency plans for the next one. And it was a result of the contingency plans that we assigned 6 prominent scientists and 6 prominent military people to a committee to manage this problem and keep it under control. And in their turn, they created security forces. They trained teams to recover these things. They established a program to keep it secret.
These documents, released in 1987, confirm Colonel Stevens' statement. In a top-secret, eyes-only classified memorandum, President Harry S. Truman personally authorized a 12-member commission, codenamed Operation Majestic 12.
And this was in organization and in place by the time the next one happened. The next vehicle came down on the 25th of March of 1978, almost a year later, at Aztec, New Mexico. And by this time, they have the committee, they have the security forces, they have a detachment in training, they have an organization and a plan, and it happened to be based at Durango, Colorado, which was the nearest Army base of size near Roswell, north of New Mexico. And so Durango was immediately notified and went into action and provided the first security forces to protect the area where the Aztec vehicle came down. The Aztec vehicle was observed on radar when it was coming in, and so air traffic control people knew about where it landed, and they furnished the coordinates to a helicopter from Durango military base, which flew down there and identified its position, hot radio contact. Security forces were already on their way. They left when the helicopter did, and they arrived on scene while the helicopter was still there and quickly surrounded the area, kept all the people living inside of their secure area in their homes, wouldn't let them out for 3 days while the recovery operation took place. In the meantime, the 6 scientists and 6 generals had been notified to proceed to Durango, where they each went by special airplane and arrived about the same time, and a team was made up and transportation furnished, and they were driven to the crash site near Aztec, where they took charge of the vehicle on the ground and succeeded in disassembling it eventually and recovering the bodies and taking them into custody.
Major Virgil Armstrong, who served for 22 years in the Defense Intelligence Agency, the CIA, and the elite unit Green Berets during the Vietnam War, witnessed the recovery operation.
I received documents which said that a UFO had landed in the middle of White Sands, New Mexico proving grounds, and that this object was inert, was under surveillance, and would be kept under surveillance until they could determine whether it was hostile or friendly. It later turned out that it was friendly in that the occupants were dead, and when we got aboard, there were 5 bodies. The bodies were diminutive in size, in other words, 3.5 feet. The largest one was just under 4 feet. 2 of them were obviously the commanding officers because 2 of them wore epaulets on their shoulders. Later turns out that they were all male. When we flew them back to Wright-Patterson, of course, the examination, physical examination, and the autopsy, of course, revealed that they were indeed all male.
This was the first one where we got a good look at the creatures that were aboard, because in the other crash, the creatures were carried away by the staff that recovered it quickly, and it was not the same team that had been established to organize this. So now there is a team established, and one of the members of this team was Dr. Detley V. Bronk, who was a specialist in biomedical programs and procedures. He was a student of the possibility of life in space. He was a leading biological researcher in a university in the East. He was one of our leading biological scientists, and the bodies were turned over to him, who took them into his custody. Those creatures were described as being about 3.5 feet tall. 4 feet 3 inches tall was the average size. They had disproportionately large heads, large eyes in the heads, disproportionately large for the head. They had disproportionately long arms with long fingers, and they were dressed in a tight-fitting military-type uniform with a stiff collar. The craft was about 100 feet in diameter, and it had a small circular dome in the top that was 20-some feet in diameter, rising 8 or 10 feet above the upper surface of the flange of this 100-foot diameter disc, which was a thin disc. It was relatively thin, and it only came 3 or 4 feet below. So there was just a small capsule in this center of about 20 by 18 feet in the center of a 100-foot craft. They learned to disassemble this craft by finding a lever inside of the cockpit that could be pulled, and it released a pie-shaped section, and other levers released other sections. So they successfully took it apart in the field and carried it away on big Army trucks. We believe that more vehicles came down after that, up to possibly 16 in the hands of the American government, and over 33 bodies altogether. And it appears that in most cases they were taken to the nearest Atomic Energy Commission facility. And they were taken to Los Alamos. They were taken to another one in New Mexico south of there. Some parts were sent to Wright Field for analysis, but we believe that the bulk of the residue was taken to Area 51, which also was under the control of the Atomic Energy Commission. As a matter of fact, all of the crash-recovered vehicles always remained under the control of the AEC, headed by Dr. Vannevar Bush, and later by his successor, and I don't remember his name anymore. But they've never been out of control of AEC. And we believe that there is an extensive research facility studying crash residue in this Site 51 area, a sub-area of that called S4. And we have interviewed scientists that work there and security guards that work in the facility that tell us quite a bit about what is going on. There is a habitat there where live aliens have been taken, where we have successfully kept them alive for as much as years at a time.
Physicist Robert S. Lazar worked in the S4 complex and witnessed these super-secret projects.
They are actively and have in their possession alien spacecraft, and they are actively undergoing analysis and flying them. They set up and produce their own gravitational field. Just as the Earth holds all matter down, they produce that same field, but out of phase, and it repels itself. The effects that can cause, the way in which everything operates is by all intents and purposes magic. I mean, it is so far beyond our level of technology.
Nevertheless, Lazar states, there are regular test flights of these crashed UFOs in the S4 area. And one of these test flights was filmed by witnesses after Lazar learned of the dates of the testing. This fascinating film shows one of these objects maneuvering near Las Vegas, Nevada, demonstrating flight characteristics as described by Lazar and so many other UFO witnesses. Incredible? This United States government memorandum to FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover confirms that until 1950, 3 so-called flying saucers had been recovered in New Mexico. They were described as being circular in shape, 50 feet in diameter, each one occupied by 3 bodies of human shape, 3 feet tall. And also the NATO study of 1964 mentioned UFO crashes.
There was an extensive annex based upon one of the UFOs had crashed in northern Germany, right near the Baltic Sea. It had crashed very near where the Russian and British zones came together. This was a disk that was 30 meters across in diameter and 5 meters thick. It crashed, and the British Army retrieved it with the British Engineer Battalion. And they somehow learned how to take the object apart. They were able to get inside of it, and they learned somehow to break it down into pie wedge-shaped pieces. And they hauled those pieces away on what we call lowboy trucks. And they hauled them away, and I understood that they were actually turned over to the Americans. This was a crash, and in the object were small bodies, approximately 12 of them. They were small gray creatures with large heads.
Where is the assessment final report today?
When they concluded the study in 1964, they published 15 copies. They gave it the Cosmic Top Secret Clearance classification with an additional classification of eyes only and need to know. 1 copy was provided to the Secretary General of NATO. 1 copy was in the personal possession of General Lyman Lemnitzer, who was the Supreme Allied Commander. And copies were provided to most of the senior military representatives for the NATO alliance at that time.
In 1983, the German federal government denied possessing any information on UFOs. Why are they lying?
I think the German government knows full well what's going on. I think they're well aware of the assessment. And I know that there is a German agency at a very high level in the German Defense Agency that is involved with UFO research. Every major allied organization and allied nation in Europe has an office, an agency, a high-level representative who works on UFO research.
The discovery of the crashed UFO was, in the eyes of the military leaders, too sensitive to become public. These documents prove that they were afraid that people would panic, fearing an extraterrestrial invasion. And also they hoped that they could benefit from the newly retrieved highly advanced technology in the arms race of the Cold War.
I believe that when they say that the secrecy is necessary because it's a national security problem, I think they really believe that. And I think that it comes out of the thinking behind the war gaming with computers after World War II. We learned to fight computer wars. And in the process, we discovered that there are rules. There are certain things that you cannot do without throwing the computer war to one side so far that the game is over. And one of those things was the introduction of a new unexpected technological development. So now the UFOs represent exactly that, the potential for a new unexpected technological development. And in wargaming, we, having discovered that such a breakthrough always throws the advantage to the one who experienced the technological development. For instance, the stirrup for the French. At one time, they won a war because they had stirrups and the English did not. This becomes a great danger to any potential enemy because he has to be concerned about what the nature of that is and how much it puts him at disadvantage. In that sense, it does become a national security problem because it offers serious implications to any potential enemy who must then do something about it. And anything he does is going to be an act of war.
Well, for many years, one of the reasons was the Cold War. We did not want the Soviets to know what we knew. And then later we found out that the Soviets knew pretty much about it as much as we did. The implications of the conclusions of the study were so astounding that the decision was made that they could not release this information because it would be terribly disruptive to the populations of Europe and the United States, actually to the populations of the world, that we were being surveyed by highly advanced, high-technology extraterrestrial cultures. One of the major conclusions was that one of those civilizations, the people looked exactly like we did. And that troubled the military people in Shape Headquarters because it became quite apparent to them that these aliens could put on a suit and a tie or sport jacket, sit next to you in a restaurant, sit next to you on a bus, or walk up and down the corridors of Shape Headquarters, and you'd never know. That troubled the generals a lot.
At a conference in the Pentagon, the Central Intelligence Agency decided to pass, to quote verbally from the release protocols, a broad educational program integrating efforts of all concerned agencies with two major aims, training and debunking. The debunking aim would result in reduction of public interest in flying saucers. The armed forces received the order to collect and evaluate UFO reports and to release only misleading explanations to the public. According to Air Force Regulation 202 from August 26, 1953, it was explicitly prohibited to release UFO reports to the news media until the object is positively identified as a familiar object. And the Joint Chiefs of Staff Instruction, JANIP 146, declared UFO sightings to merit reports containing information affecting the national defense within the espionage laws, prohibiting the unauthorized transmission or revelation in any manner under the penalty of up to 10 years imprisonment. Commander Bethune experienced the further handling of UFO reports.
To my knowledge, there was no thorough investigation made. When we landed at Argentia, Newfoundland, an Army intelligence officer, a captain, was sent to interrogate us. He interrogated us, and he made a report that I learned later was sent to Wright Petersen. When we arrived at the Naval Air Station Test Center, Patuxent River, Maryland, outside of Washington, again, we had Navy intelligence to interrogate us, and we had to write a description ourselves and a report. And of course, that was submitted through channels to the Navy in Washington, which I later found out then went to the Air Force. So it was up to the Air Force pretty much, because of the different project, Grudge, Blue Book, or what have you, to do the investigation. They were accepting all the reports of any unusual objects that were seen by the military, to my knowledge.
Were you asked to be silent about this incident?
It was in a kind of a roundabout way. It was not really a warning. It was just the type of thing that we were pretty much told that not to talk about it. I mean, I got the impression that it was a type of thing that I probably wouldn't even talk to my wife about. I didn't know. So I would say that as far as the interrogation by the intelligence officers, that's kind of the impression that they left. I did have the Commodore who ran our air wing at the time call me in and for me to describe the sighting to him, and he pretty much led me to believe that it was the type of thing that I really shouldn't talk about, and not that they were trying to discredit anything they were doing, but it was just something that we were not should not talk about, really. And I don't ever recall them saying, ordering us not to say anything about it.
What were the results of the official investigation of the incident?
The report had gone to Project Grudge, evidently Project Blue Book, and I think the final conclusion on the report of Project Twinkle was that it was an unusual display of the aurora borealis.
How did you react to this explanation, and what made you sure it was wrong?
Well, many things, because of the fact that we were headed south. The northern lights are usually behind you. We had been all experienced pilots flying in that area, and we would know it was a clear night, and we would know if there was any display because of the weather reports. It was normally part of the weather report. We had passed over the weather ship, the guard ship, maybe a couple hours before, and it was nothing that said anything about the weather. Plus the fact the object was definitely below the horizon, was definitely originated its path from the water, and it was always between us and the water, never above us. So it was always below the aircraft.
How big was it and how did it look like?
It was, my estimate was around between 200 and 300 feet in diameter. And after I got the reports out of the archives, I noticed that all the pilots that were really in the cockpit, their estimate, the two of us, was basically about the same. It was circular, and it had a little bit of a dome on top. And at the time we could see that good, it was above the horizon. It was not sitting level. It was just sitting at a little bit of an angle.
What do you believe it was?
My conclusion that this was a craft that was not constructed here on the Earth. It was a craft with some kind of intelligence control, and we possibly ran up on what they were doing, whether they were doing some type of research on our water or what, and it came out to take a look at us and to see if we were hostile, and being a transport with no weapons or no gun, I guess they determined that we were not. And so they left back in basically 180 degrees from the direction they approached.
Why do you think they came to such a nonsensical explanation as that it was just an aurora borealis?
I feel at that time that there were probably a lot of sightings, and I feel it was an easy way to come to a conclusion that would not be questioned, and to get it off of their back, so to speak, because I guess they had a lot of questions, they had a lot of reports, and then of course I have had the suspicion for quite some time that it was of such a classified nature that they did not want the information to be published. In fact, when I asked the intelligence officer that questioned us at Patuxent River what his opinion was, and why they wanted to keep something like that quiet, well, the answer he gave me was that one of the things that they were afraid of was mass hysteria, whether the public couldn't accept it at that time. And he used as an example, and I've heard later it was used many times, that the Orson Welles program on radio many years ago, the panic that the people went through when they thought that the Martians were coming.
Thanks to this policy of cover-up and secrecy, the evidence becoming public was just the peak of the iceberg. One of the films released from the Blue Book archives was taken on April 15, 1967, from a Coast Guard helicopter at Catalina Island off the coast of California. Another one is the footage shot in 1956 in the state of Utah, showing two discs passing a boulder at an incredible speed, here again in slow motion. Or this film taken by a civilian employee near Luke Air Force Base in Texas in 1959. A jet tries to intercept the object. This amazing series of photographs of a Saturn-shaped craft flying around the peak of the island of Trinidad in the Atlantic Ocean was taken on January 19, 1958 by an official photographer of the Brazilian Navy aboard the Navy training ship Almirante Saldanha in the presence of the whole crew. After the official analysis proved the object to be at least 120 feet in diameter, the Brazilian President Juscelino Kubitschek presented the pictures personally at a press conference on February 20th, 1958. Not before 1985 did the National Aeronautics and Space Administration release UFO footage taken by their astronauts in terrestrial and lunar orbit. This film was taken in 1956 by astronaut James McDivitt aboard Gemini 4, one day before he photographed the cylindrical UFO in Earth's orbit, one day before the historic landing on the moon on July 20th, 1969. The Apollo 11 crew filmed these two luminous objects in lunar orbit. On an Apollo 12 film, a bright object flies about the lunar surface at great speed. Let's magnify it and analyze its flight pattern. Here, a dome-shaped disk of obviously giant size hovers next to the moon. And here it appears that two UFOs have landed on the lunar surface. When we magnify it, we recognize further details. Do extraterrestrials have bases on the moon? This official British Airways film was taken in the early 70s on one of the Concorde test flights over southern England. Clearly, we see a small bell-shaped probe surrounding the supersonic plane, hovering for seconds in front of the engines. Also, in the once Soviet Union, the UFOs created much attention. The famous test pilot Colonel Dr. Marina Popovich collects reports of her fellow pilots about UFO sightings.
10 лет назад еще эту тему высмеивали.
There are many examples. I got hundreds of letters from pilots. Altogether, I know of about 4,000 such reports. I received one letter from Vyatkin, one of our test pilots, and I met with him. He flew one of our MiG-19 interceptors when he had a strange encounter. He had just reached an altitude of 15,000 feet when he had the impression that his aircraft collided with something and started to spin. The MiG-19 is a very strong aircraft. The pilot went further down and tried to win altitude, but again he was pressured down. He tried it a third time when he saw a beam of light, a silverish beam, coming from a large object, and he realized it was a UFO. He turned around, flying in a circle, and went in for a landing. He was very emotional after that.
We can just assume how much UFO evidence is being held back from the public. But we get quite a good impression when we study the latest events on the Caribbean island of Puerto Rico, the so-called 51st state of the USA, a quasi-colony without the right to vote, investigated by the local journalist Jorge Martin.
There have been many incidents in which UFOs have been seen over inhabited areas by many people, and at the same time, military aircraft such as AWAC radar planes, or maybe even, as explained by the witnesses, F-14 Tomcats, jet fighters, or some aircraft from the Puerto Rico Air National Guard. that have been seen chasing these objects. In some occasions, there have been some incidents in which people say there seemed to be some struggle between the UFOs and the jet fighters, and in some occasions, military personnel has been seen in these places checking the situation. This happened in December 28, 1988 at 7:45 p.m. The people of the area of Cabo Rojo and Lajas, two towns to the southwest of the island, that night saw a very huge ball of blue light, as we see here in the drawing, that was flying over the Sierra Bermeja Mountains, a small ridge there where many of these incidents have been happening in Puerto Rico. And then this ball of light changed, and it changed to another color, to a huge ball of yellowish light, and the witnesses all could see that this was part of a triangular craft, very big in size, and this yellow light was underneath the object. It was a almost semicircular, something like a bulge or a ball of yellow light, very bright, and the two jet fighters were trying to intercept it, and in 3 different occasions made it veer away and change its trajectory, its direction. In the third occasion, the object stopped in midair. One of the jet fighters seemed to, as if it was going to collide with the object by the back of it, and the people began screaming because they believed there was going to be a collision and an explosion and something terrible might happen. But what happened was that the jet fighter just disappeared, vanished in midair, next to the UFO. The other jet fighter kept flying next to it by the right side of it, and then all of a sudden, it also disappeared. It vanished. The UFO then came back again, turned around, flew over an area known there as the Saman Lake. It's a small pond surrounded by many palm trees. And over these palm trees, I would say at about an altitude of 100 feet from the palm trees, it divided itself, this huge triangular object, into 2 different objects. It split with a luminous explosion, a soundless explosion, a very bright light. And both parts of the craft, one flew very fast to the north and one flew very fast to the east and disappeared. There were other witnesses that say that there was a third jet fighter that was checking on the situation from a distance. But when that pilot of that third jet fighter saw what happened, apparently he tried to flee the area, and 3 small balls of red light came out from the UFO and began chasing it, and they disappeared to the north. They don't know what happened to this third jet fighter.
How many witnesses followed this event?
Up to now, more than 100 witnesses.
What are your conclusions?
Well, this incident did occur. It's a very important one. When you have more than 100 witnesses that describe the same scene to you, they make the same drawings to you, what they saw. All the details fit with all the descriptions. And we have other information due to the investigation we made. For example, that this jet craft must have been from the Navy of the United States, because that day the Puerto Rico Air National Guard had no airplanes or any air practices in the area. And Roosevelt Road Naval Station in Ceiba, a principal base in the Caribbean from the U.S., did have some air practices that night and personnel in the area, even though they denied it. But the FAA, Federal Aviation Administration in San Juan, confirmed to us that there were practices from Roosevelt Road Naval Station there.
A similar triangle-shaped UFO was observed and filmed by hundreds of witnesses in March 1990 over Belgium. 2 F-16 fighter jets tried to intercept the UFO. The pilots reported that the object increased speed in just 3 seconds from 200 to 850 miles per hour. Mr. Martin, are there any official statements regarding the incidents in Puerto Rico?
As a matter of fact, due to the situation happening in the southwest of Puerto Rico, it's all around the island, but in the southwest it's more obvious, more visible because of the many incidents that are happening there constantly. And it's a heavily populated area. The police and the civil defense and the authorities began a very intensive disinformation program trying to ridicule and to make everything seem as a lie, as fabrication by those people who were informing all of this. But fortunately, after they began doing this, especially the Civil Defense Agency in Puerto Rico, a source of ours gave us this letter that was sent secretly by the State Director of the Civil Defense Agency of Puerto Rico, Colonel Jose M. Enoya, in which he states clearly that the situation is real, that they are keeping an eye on the situation and investigating everything, just to be sure that what is happening and these sightings and this incident with UFOs and USOs, unknown submerged objects also, because they come out from the sea and into the sea. Many people have seen this happen there. It's not a threat to the security of the people of Puerto Rico on the Puerto Rican territory. As you know, something that doesn't exist can be a threat to anyone. There's also another thing. He says here that several agencies of Puerto Rico are involved in the investigation secretly, the military, the Radio Observatory of Arecibo, and they have always denied for many years that they had anything to do whatever with the UFO situation, and it's stated here by him that they do have something to do and they are checking on the situation. And Mr. Noya, these words written by him are very important because he's the liaison between the Puerto Rico National Guard Army and the Defense Intelligence Agency. He's their man in Puerto Rico. Yes, and the Defense Intelligence Agency is like the CIA in the military. So he knows what he's talking about.
On the morning of May 14th, 1988, Amaury Rivera, a young man from Puerto Rico, photographed a giant disc, followed and circled by two jet interceptors. What makes the sensational pictures even more interesting is Rivera's claim that he had contact with the occupants of this UFO.
Hello, my name is Amaury Rivera. I live in Puerto Rico, and back in 1988, I was working in a nightclub, and there was a musical group there. One of my cousins wanted me to photograph the musical group, and she loaned me a camera with some film. On my way back home, I encountered two small beings, two small strange men, which I didn't think were men from outer space. And they took me somewhere where there were other people besides myself, other human people, like from Puerto Rico, I guess. From here, another human being showed up. He claimed to be from a distant planet. He was dressed in black. He had a dark skin, but he was not a Negro. He had a long black hair up to the shoulders, and he spoke to us with the mouth, verbally, and no telepathic speaking. He showed us various projections, which looked very real, the projections, and he informed us about a whole bunch of things that are even still incredible to me. Then they returned me to...
What did this holographic projection show?
The holographs were mainly, the first one that I can remember was like a short trip through space. We saw where he came from, where he's said to be from. We saw his people, we saw the houses that they use. And the second one was about a meteor or a rock falling to Earth in the near future, which is going to cause a lot of havoc in the world. This would fall, it's going to fall in very near the Caribbean, Puerto Rico, and those other small islands, but it's going to affect the whole world, not just Puerto Rico. The last one is that they projected was showing us how there was only going to be one government on the planet Earth. They'll be living on some sort of artificial island that's going to be floating in the middle of a dark, black, dirty sea. And then this man returned me to my car again and left me somewhere different from where the whole ordeal had started. Apparently, they took me with car and all. After this, at this given time, I heard some jets in the sky, and I still had my cousin's camera, and I took the pictures, 4 of which I'm making public nowadays.
So the jets followed the UFO.
Yes, it was. They seemed to be surveilling it. I only got to capture just one of the jets in the photograph, but there were 3 of them. Or maybe I got in one of the photos one, and in the second or third I got one of the other ones, because they would go around it very far away, and while this one was closer, and turn, very far. And by the time this one was coming back, another one was turning over there. There was always one or the other close to the object, to the UFO.
Jorge Martin has carefully investigated this case.
Amaury Rivera's case to me, is a very special one and a very important one, because in Amaury's case, he was abducted and he was taken away by aliens. One of them was human-like, and 2 small creatures that they explained to him were some type of genetical or biological organic android that they made to do some chores outside so they don't have to risk themselves in our environment. That's what they explained to him, the so-called human alien that he saw in the craft. And it's important also because of the evidences that he has on the case, because when he was released, he had a camera with him, and he was able to take pictures of the object that apparently had abducted him, the craft, flying saucer type, and also some jet fighters from the United States, F-14 again. In most of these cases in the island, F-14s are involved with these situations of chasing and harassment and checking on these objects when they are seen in the different areas of the island. And he was able to get them in those pictures together. So this clearly, when you see those photographs, it's obvious that the government has been lying for many years, because there's the UFO there, and there's also the jet fighters dealing with the situation, which they denied for more than 40 years. It's there.
Were you able to locate any other witnesses?
That's what I was going to explain at this moment, Michael. The Amaury's case is also very important, because I have several people who apparently had been contacted by the same alien that abducted Amaury and the small ones that were with him in a separate fashion. They have nothing to do with Amaury's incident. This being, this human-like alien, is contacting people all around the area of the southwest of Puerto Rico. I have people from the town of Yauco who seem to have been contacted by this man. I have this fisherman, Andres Maldonado, who I got in contact with Amaury, because he told me several things Amaury had told no one before, only I knew them, about the name of the alien and all the details that he was using to check on the people who really may have been in contact with the same being the night he was abducted, because there were about 14 other people there in the craft that night. And when Maldonado told me all this information that he couldn't know because he was not involved with Amaury's case, I got them together. And at this moment, I have about 3 different people who seem to have been in contact with the same alien. So they are doing something, and they are getting in contact with more and more people and preparing people for something. And this is very important, because all this corroborates Amaury's incident also.
Other witnesses contacted Amaury himself.
So far, between 1988 and 1992, I've been able to localize 7 of these people. Because I've gone on different TV shows and different articles, and I've always been asking if anybody remembers anything similar happening to them, and that year, during that time, Mother's Day, to please get in touch with me. And I have gotten in touch with hundreds of people, but out of the hundreds, 7 definitely were there with me. I still have 7 to go. Maybe I'll never find them. Maybe they'll see this.
You investigated the Rivera case, Colonel Stevens. What was your impression?
Well, of course, Jorge Martin took me to meet Jorge Rivera, Amaury Rivera, shortly after I got there with the Mexican team to study some phenomena in Puerto Rico. And when I first met Amaury, he was very reluctant to describe his case because it still frightened him to think about it. And it took some time before we could develop enough confidence where he was comfortable talking to us about the case. But he would still tremble when he thought about it. He would turn pale. He'd become weak. He was frightened. But he has now reviewed the details and the points in sufficient length and depth that he can face the experience without the trauma, which he has learned to do. And today, or yesterday, we saw for the first time that he is able to manage his emotions well enough to describe that contact in considerable detail.
You carefully analyzed the Rivera photographs.
We took the pictures, yes. We took the pictures taken by Amaury Rivera to a NASA consultant facility in Scottsdale, where we put them through a computer analysis using latest state-of-the-art equipment. And we found that both the disc-shaped craft seen in the photographs and the aircraft are considerable distance from the camera, between 3 and 5 miles. We discovered that the jet fighter was moving and that the disc-shaped craft was moving relatively slow or not moving at all. We discovered that the ambient light conditions were correct in all respects. We were able to eliminate montages, paste-ups, reflections, models, all kinds of forms of technical manipulation of photographs. And we had to conclude that the pictures were real and that they were exactly as described by the witness when he took the photographs.
Noch dazu wurde Amaury Rivera eingeschüchtert und unter Druck gesetzt, seine Fotos herauszugeben.
Well, a short time after the incident, 3 men showed up at my home in Puerto Rico, and one of them stood in their car downstairs. And they claimed to be from CIA. And they handed me 2 pieces of paper, which I was so nervous I couldn't really read, but I remember seeing the letter CIA, which is the intelligence agency from the United States, and they said that it would be easier and better for me if I handed them the photographs and the negatives, but they did not say, what photographs or what negatives. They didn't specify, and I just told them that I did not know what they were talking about. And they said it would be easier because we have an order to register your house, to look through your house. And I said, well, go ahead, be my guest and look. And they looked, but they couldn't find them because I had hid them very well.
Amaury's case was not an individual case.
Well, the results are in the sense that this really is happening. There's a pattern that fits in all these cases. Most of the persons involved are women. I would say that 5-to-1, women advantage men, if we can call this an advantage, in being abducted by aliens. Most of the abductions are made by the so-called small, big-headed gray creatures, or reticulians, or whatever they are being called at this moment. And the pattern also fits with the cases in the United States and other places in the sense that they seem to be doing something with genetics. They're very interested in our genetics, in the reproductive system. There's an angle in all of this that has also to do something with spiritual development of man, and so forth.
Pat Mercatilia has been investigating cases of UFO abductions on a scientific basis for 10 years.
An abduction is an occurrence which people report where they have a vivid dream of being terrified to death of something chasing them. Sometimes it's down the street, sometimes it's in the car while they're walking, or something that they are extremely terrified of for the evening that they are sleeping in bed, or sometimes driving down the road, and the next morning they have these reoccurring vivid dreams of this terrifying time they've had, and they are almost put into a shock by it, and they don't know who to turn to tell about it, so they keep it locked up in their minds, and it begins to deteriorate their health in a lot of cases. Sometimes people have kept it in their mind for 20 years without being able to tell anyone about it because of the feeling that they would be ridiculed, or their sanity may be questioned by revealing what they have experienced.
How do you handle these nightmares?
Yes, we have perfected that, and they go through a hypnotic regression, we call it, where the doctor puts them into a relaxed state, and in this state they are able to totally relax, and in that manner begin to remember the entire incident, and much more clearly than normal.
One of the victims of a UFO abduction was Maria Rosaria from Puerto Rico.
I want to start saying that what was happening to me, it is very important, and it is very real, and it is not different of what is happening to many women, at least at the island of Puerto Rico. I want to say that this is important because it's, our lives is going to change. And I want to say too that it is real because you could speak to it and you could touch it and you could feel it very deep into your own. And yes, my experience, I was laid down on my bed, but that night it was early. It was about 10 to 10:30. I was watching television on my bed, and I heard like some strong buzzing sound. I don't know what was happening with that kind of noise. Suddenly, it was appear in my room, two little creatures. Then I was paralyzed, and I was out of conscious. Then when I opened my eyes, I am in a place that they are examining my body, the whole body. And they was telling me that my body was in good conditions and my body was perfect. So they make an exam, gynecological exam, and they take out some kind of a piece from my left side ovary. So I would say that that's by the first time, the first thing, what happened. Then the second time they came in the same manner, the same way. I lost my conscience again, and when I opened my eyes, I am in a place that I describe this place like Cabo Rojo. They took me to a place in Puerto Rico, mountains of Puerto Rico, and they show me a big baby. And when I saw that baby, I immediately, I said that I couldn't believe it because it was myself. That baby was myself. And I said to them, "What's that?" it is impossible. How could you make that? How could you did it? It is impossible. So, but that's me, I said. It was myself, that baby.
Do you believe the aliens cloned you from your genetic material?
Yes, from my genetical material. Yes. Because I could feel that baby myself. And she was a girl. And that's the way I feel it. I feel that baby. That baby was myself.
Did they tell you why they created this clone?
Why? I think because they need to implant very, very soon some kind of life in our planet. Yeah.
And why do they want this?
Well, that's a little difficult for me to explain it now. I have information that I cannot remember, and I have another information that I am not going to tell to anybody. But I think that this kind of life is going to be implanted in our planet very soon. I don't know how soon, but very soon.
In other cases, the witnesses related how a small spherical object was implanted through their nose. Pat Mercatilla took these reports about alien implants seriously. He subjected his clients to a magnetic resonance imaging and CAT scan of their brains, leading to the same result in all cases. A foreign body was detected in the skull within the nasal tribanates, about 3 millimeter in diameter. Evidence of the alien contact? Colonel Stephen investigated some of those reports.
Yes, we have reports of direct dialogue with alien extraterrestrial beings seen aboard spacecraft. And the contact is usually made in the language of the witness, which to me indicates a substantial project preceding this to learn the language to make the contact. In the few cases that I've been able to examine in detail, I find that the study may have taken years before the contact was made and before they know enough about the contact to communicate with him intelligently.
Is there any evidence for these contacts?
Well, the one that I investigated for 5 years in Charleston, South Carolina, was that kind of a case. It had substantial proof. There were dozens of other witnesses. There were recordings of the sounds of the spacecraft. There were pictures taken by others beside the principal witness. It was watched on radar by the air traffic control people and by military radar and by the radar in the noses of transport airplanes. It left marks on the ground. It took the witness aboard and repeatedly returned to the witness. The occupants even went into the witness's home at one time. They gave him a metal object as a kind of a recognition of his overcoming his fear of those creatures.
What kind of information was given to the contactees?
Well, they generally get a description of an alien's view of our society and some of its ills. And they sometimes get a description of the alien's planet, home planet, and his society. But basically the contacts are to derive information about our planet and how we think, which they apparently analyze and send back to their superiors someplace else.
The evidence seems to be overwhelming to me that we've had an intimate interrelationship with them for several thousand years. I have concluded, as has Zecharia Sitchin, that the human race has probably been seeded here by high-intelligence civilizations from other places. I think those who placed us here and those who have been intimately involved with our genetic manipulation and growth are interested in us. I think they're concerned with us. I think they are related to us. And I think that that's why they're so involved.
Mr. Sitchin, did the Sumerian gods, the Anunnaki, return?
Well, the reasons for coming back are, I would say, the very fact that they've been coming and going between their planet and ours every 3,600 years. And if you examine the advancement in human knowledge, you'll see that they happened in stages every 3,600 years. So the reason is that they are coming back to our vicinity, so they are coming back to visit us. Now, as to the UFOs, you know, one of the problems people have with all the UFO stories is that there are so many of them, which means that if these UFOs exist, they must be coming from somewhere close by. I mean, they are not coming from a star that is 10 or 50 light years away and are visiting us every night and over this country and over that country. So to me, the reactivation, the evidence for the reactivation of a space base on Mars suggests that the UFOs, if they are coming, and I have not seen one, but many say that they've seen them and even met whoever operates them, that they must be coming from Mars. Now, the Anunnaki do not look like those small gray beings that have apparently only skins, that are asexual, they are neither male nor female, or they are both, and have big heads and almond-shaped eyes. The Anunnaki definitely looked like us because they made us to look like them. So these are not the Anunnaki, but these are beings which we find, which I found in the ancient depictions of the Sumerians, very similar ones. And those were the messengers of the Anunnaki. So I would say, and that's what I say in my latest book that you mentioned, that these are robots. You can call them hominids or any term that you want to use, that are intelligent enough to operate these UFOs and who are on a scouting mission to see what goes on Earth, because in previous occasions when the Anunnaki were coming and going, including the one that we know from the Bible as the story of the deluge, the great flood.
Indeed, the signs are multiplying. Since the beginning of the 1980s, strange patterns appear in the grain in connection with UFO sightings, increasing in numbers and complexity. Are they messages of the alien intelligence?
They're certainly trying to tell us something, I feel. These are messages. My own personal view on it is, my own personal feeling about this is that they are telling us that we have reached the point of no return with the contamination of the planet. We have got to act now. If we don't, we will have gone too far and it will be irreversible. I feel this very strongly, and this is the message I think they are trying to put to us.
This pattern appeared in 1992 in Hampshire, South England. It shows two worlds in connection with each other, and below a Sumerian symbol meaning the nobles with their flying starships.
I'm in no doubt whatsoever in my own mind that these formations are being created by UFOs. There is always an increase in UFOs before the crop formations start to appear. The one goes with the other, and it has done for several years now. When you get an increase in UFO sightings, the crop circles start to appear. There's a great deal connecting these flying objects with the corn formations.
Were UFOs filmed or photographed over crop circles?
Yes, there have been 2 or 3 instances to my knowledge where people have actually recorded on video camera strange disc-like objects flying around the cornfields at about the height of the ears of corn. These show strange, brightly glowing lights, small ones, actually interweaving in and out of the corn They jump over hedges and continue in the next cornfields, and certainly give the impression that they are intelligently controlled.
Everything indicates that we are facing the next step in the approach between man and extraterrestrials. An upcoming event of far-reaching implications as has never occurred before in our history. More frequently, entire cities or suburban colonies saw strange objects, as here near the nuclear plant of Greifswald, in what is now the former East Germany, in August of 1990. These amateur videos were taken by Dr. Ludmila Ivanova, a nuclear physician belonging to the Russian personnel of the nuclear plant.
It's developing fast. There is an increase in the numbers, there is an increase in the complexity. Everything seems to be gaining momentum. There is an increase in UFO sightings. I feel very strongly that this thing is coming to a head and something is going to occur before very long. I feel certain about it.
One of the conclusions of the study was that there was a program or a process of some kind taking place. There seemed to be some sort of a planned and organized procedure unfolding. They had evidence from the study that this phenomenon had been going on for a very, very long time, and there seemed to be some kind of an intelligent plan involved. They never were able to conclude what that would be, but that was quite a concern to the senior generals, because they didn't even at that time know what the motives were for these extraterrestrial intelligences.
What is your personal conjecture?
I've been studying this phenomenon for over 30 years, and I'm convinced that we're reaching a point where not only do we have to educate the people of the planet, but I think the aliens themselves are going to make themselves known before too long.
How would an unprepared public react?
Well, there's a danger that the public would panic if they haven't been educated, if they haven't been given some kind of an inculcation, some idea of what's going on. And that's one of the reasons why I've decided to speak out about the matter.
Maybe scenes like this one of an open-air concert of the famous singer Maya Chava in the Soviet Georgian capital Tbilisi will belong to our daily life one day. Soviet television shot the concert in the fall of 1989, broadcasting it on April of 1990, without leaving a shadow of a doubt about what was a secret in the Red Empire for such a long time. We are not alone. The extraterrestrials are here, observing us. And, indeed, the contact with them could be the greatest chance of a golden future for mankind.
Where I entered the hangar, I witnessed recovered alien spacecraft that the Department of Naval Intelligence in the United States was back engineering.
Right dead center of the test site is what is known as Area 51, also known as Watertown, also known as the Ranch. At the very center is Groom Lake. It's about 10 miles on each side, and this is where most of the secret activity goes on. Just 10 miles south of the Groom Lakes complex is an even more secret area. This is where the saucers, the discs, are flown, an area called S4. There's 9 hangars inside the mountain.
Stories about Area 51 and possible alien technology there had been floating around for as long as I had lived in Las Vegas, but there had never been any thorough investigation, primarily because no one who had inside knowledge of the program had ever been willing to talk about it publicly until Bob Lazar.
And when I first saw the craft the first time, it was walking into the hangar, and my impression was, well, this explains all the UFO sightings. This is just a secret military aircraft we're working on. That's the end of that. It was actually the second time when I saw the craft, when I got to enter it and look over it, and I finally realized what was going on, that this is an alien craft. And of course this was after I read the briefings, and that was a totally different feeling. That was not a feeling of excitement. It was almost an ominous feeling.
But we have things in the Nevada desert that would make George Lucas envious.